So exciting stuff. Market data drop just happened for Toronto. The big national one with Korea, I think is June 17th. So in about 10
Oh,
days.
when they do the quarterly review.
Yeah,
Yeah.
along with all their predictions. Also, welcome to my very professional, I do not promote smoking t-shirt right now. It's called Friday, and this is life.
I don't know. I've had a week where I could have a cigarette.
Oh my
I'm not
God.
gonna
So
lie.
tell me, before we dive into the numbers, which very interesting, especially if you break it down by area.
Yeah,
What,
the area. But
yeah,
I have a thought on all of that. But yes, go ahead.
what was your week like?
So, I don't I feel like we've had some not negative, but and I believe in trying to find positive spins, and not that's not to say like the trolls who are like, oh, agents are always looking for the positives to tell people to spend their money and get into debt. But I don't think that anything in life should be looked at on a negative. There's
Right.
actually someone that I do follow on social. We were talking about him as a potential guest because he's brilliant and he's amazing. But when he posts, everything is like doomsday, Canada, this, and I'm more than happy. And we've been talking about some of these things that we're drawing light to, like the condo market or that type of thing. We talked about defaults, things that you need to be worried about when buying in a condo, that type of thing. But I don't love to say that like my profession is something that I thought like I look at on a lens as a negative.
Right.
But I don't want to feel like I'm repeating myself, but I was talking to another agent the other day, and I said to her, we did a deal together and we were on a buyer's visit, and I just said to her, I've never seen anything like this. Like the last 6 months of being, she goes, I know, the worst of my career. And I said, yes. And it's not worst numbers. Like I'm very lucky. This is not to toot my own horn, but as you know, I've built my business on referrals, and so I have a different way of looking at my business. So I'm back to like COVID levels. Although the interesting things, like activity wise, the interesting thing for me is that it's more of a balance of like buyers and sellers than what I saw previously. Like I was just hit with every possible listing. Like I had a listing every week. All that to be said,
But during
is
COVID, when you say COVID levels, was it really busy? Are you talking about when it got really busy?
oh
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we'll see how the year ends up, but like on track to do, if not the same, if not more, then, but I think also there was a huge hiatus. All that to be said, I had what we've discovered is that it's it's a tough market. You'll hear that from a lot of people who are very busy in the business, is that it is a tough market.
For sellers or for buyers?
Both. And I think that I've come up against what I consistently see, and I think that the numbers show this in the May data,
Right.
is that buyers and sellers are not on the same page.
Okay.
So
Perfect segue to get into the data. So, because you're saying you're seeing the data, what did the data say? Should I do a quick recap? What do you
So
think?
totally, what I would say I saw was numbers all over the place. Like, so I just did a video on this where we saw sales were down 21%. You can keep me honest with these numbers, right? So sales were down year over year 21%.
Yep.
Not surprising, but by the way, 21%, we were half of COVID numbers. Remember, we were like, it was crazy if you go back. So you and I think the same way. I'm not a big believer in year over year numbers.
Right.
That is such a vacuum. Um, but if you look at it, like we went from 82 to 76, like it was small. Like I'm not taking the numbers, but I think that we saw a peak last year in May. Was one of like it was almost this like last breath in the market before it tanked.
Right. Right.
So because we're going in a recovery market, I actually thought that sales activity was great.
I would agree. What you see is month over month, it's increasing as well. Certainly, also, we should point out the year over year, the average I don't love the average. The HPI, housing price index, is better because it kind of weeds out the law of the averages, which means if you have extremes on other ends, it's going to really sway your average. So let's say you have like a $50 million sale, that's going to make it look as if the average is way higher than it is, right? If you have $150 million and like a bunch of small ones, right? So it's a difficult number to use. Having said that, even HPI, shaky in some areas, but popping in others. So
I never, by the way, I just want a disclaimer. Anytime I ever do one of these like social posts of like what the numbers were from last month, I never talk about the average sale cost.
really,
I don't because like you just said, in that month, and I'll talk about luxury listings in the numbers when we get into it. Maybe that month we saw an uptick in luxury, like it's just one purchase in time vacuum.
right?
So what was available? Who was out in the market? Like it's such a disnomer. Like it's not the average price. That doesn't mean that the house down the street went up 5% across the board because the average, it's just again adding it all up and dividing by how many there were.
Exactly.
It's not, or there are more condos that sold that month over detached.
Exactly. And that's we can totally dig into that. So like super big highlights. Let me just like read out what the press release said. Generally, May home sales continue at low levels, especially in comparison to last spring's short-lived pickup in market activity. GTA.
Oh, is it low levels? Is it low levels? I don't think they're low level. Like, I don't think it's crazy low levels.
We're seeing over 7,000 homes sold through Treb's MLS system in May 2024. And last year of May, it was 8,900. New listings entered into the MLS system were up. That was interesting to me by 21%. MLS home price HPI, the home price index composite that I was talking about, the benchmark was down 3.5% on a year-over-year basis. Remember the shoot up we were talking about? The average selling price of 1.165 million was down 2.5%. If you compare year over year, on a seasonally adjusted basis, the average selling price edged up slightly compared to April 2024. So month over month, remember we had the shoot up in May, we're seeing this, now we're seeing this again. All right, let's take a step back. I want to get your thoughts about, like, to the consumer, what does this mean? What do you think? Like, does this mean that market's dying? Does this mean that we're going to be seeing like fewer buyers out there? What happened in May? And then what do you think this translates into for June?
So again, one of the numbers you didn't hit on was the active listings, which went up 83%.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So at first you'd be like, oh my God, what is going on? There's a flood of inventory. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. No. If you look at the average months of inventory, there's still less than 3. So
Why did you steal my thunder? We should have coordinated. I was gonna be like, mic drop months of inventory.
By the way, for anyone who's listening, Natalka and I wing this, okay? I literally had people in my house until 2 minutes ago. So, I'm in the business and I was like, oh my God, 83%. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But then you have to break it down by product and you have to break it down by area. So we talked about this in the last podcast, the one before is, the issue right now that we're seeing and we're going to go forward with over the next year or so are condos. So there are situations in certain areas, CO8, CO2.
Hold on, pause. For those who don't know what the C is, that's called like the community. Toronto MLS does it. I am going to drop a link. We'll put a link in the show notes to the map so that you can just take a look at what that is. So like CO2, I'm just looking at the map right now because I always forget myself.
So that's it's Lakeshore.
Annex.
Oh, no, sorry. No, not CO2, CO1. So CO1 is all waterfront.
Western Niagara area, King Niagara, Trillium Park. Which is
all the condos, okay? Yeah.
Kensington.
So and then CO8 is the Church Young Corridor. Yeah. So waterfront down right across
Regent Park, Moss Park, yeah.
All of that, right? Lombard Street, like all that, okay?
Oh, Cabbagetown. Would you in your next comment is Cabbagetown?
No, but there aren't any condos in Cabbagetown.
Okay. Yeah. But so places within CO1 and CO8.
You're looking at anywhere from 4 to 6 months worth of inventory. So now The way that it's so interesting because no one's talking about average, like the months of inventory anymore, because that was a big misnomer in COVID where we were like, we're in a seller's market and this is how you determine a seller's market and this is how much inventory we have, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And we're still technically in spots in a seller's market, but it's not the same frenzy because buyers aren't reacting to it. Going back full circle to my comment about buyers and sellers not being on the same page is, again, we all live our lives based on rules, right? We know there are rules for everything we do in our life. And there's rules of engagement, negotiating, what's going on in the market, when you approach something, stock market, anything that, you go into a retail store, when you walk into a retail store, they don't bargain. But if you go to a market, you can bargain, right? So rules of engagement. There's no consensus of the rules of engagement in the market right now. Buyers think that everything's a fire sale because the headlines have been, the market is softened, there's a correction, it's a buyer's market. It's not a buyer's market across the board. So you'll have a listing and you'll have an agent that doesn't do a ton of business or isn't seasoned, who's not educating their clients that it's not that way, that, what? Just because something is priced a certain way doesn't mean that you now go in with $200,000 off. If they're overpriced, then you can, it's still based on the data. You're still going in and negotiating on comparables and whatever, fine. And sellers are not happy they're not getting the prices that they want. They're not happy that it's taking 30 plus days to sell their house. But what I'm really seeing in the market is it's balancing.
I would agree. It is so while months of inventory, again, I strongly encourage anyone to take a look at the full data deck that's provided by Treb, because
we're the only two nerds that do that, by the way.
It's so cool because you see things like C12. So C12 really caught my eye as well. That's like Bridle Pass, Sunnybrook, York Mills area. I think
there's a bunch of condos over there. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I bet, without knowing, you're the expert here, Rachel. You're the one who's in the market. I want to ask you about that. Is it condo driven? You've already validated. See, we don't come prepared.
No, I mean, I would say like there was one, I think C14, which is like Young and Shepherd.
Yeah.
Also had a lot of inventory.
Yep. Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I was looking in that area for a client not so long ago, first time buyer, and prices aren't great. Like you still listen, and like good inventory always sells. So these people think they're going to go in and they're going to go and like buyers will go in and they're going to just be able to get anything they want. And they want high ceilings and a corner, unit with lots of natural light and updated this and updated that and more square footage. And the reality is that I'll tell you something, like you're still looking at $1,000, $900 a square foot in a good unit at Young and Shepherd. You still are. Like you're not, yes, you can go to Bathurst and Steeles and you can go into Thornhill and you can get something for $600 a square foot, $500 a square foot, but not in Central. You still can't. But there's a lot, and where I see the opportunity for buyers is to be able to negotiate and say, you know what, I've got more to see. It allows me to make a better decision. Yep. But yeah, it's still a buyer's, like it's still this like push and pull between buyers and sellers.
Right. And it's again market driven specific as well. So I'm curious, in the luxury space, I did see longer months of inventory. What's going on? Can you talk about the luxury market?
So in the numbers, so interesting. So I also like to see, so they, on that one sheet, if you look it up on MLS, it'll give you like how many sales were in 416 by detached, by product, 416 versus 905, right? So I like to go and look. I mean, one of the striking things was 76% of all detached homes were sold in the 905 last month. 76%. I think that just like affordability, like really, I think it's affordability. And then two was, so 46% of all sales last month were detached. So continued demand for single family homes. And
Yep.
this is not investors buying up stuff. This is single family homes, people desperately trying to fit their family into something. In that, the majority of the sales, and I don't remember the exact number, I can pull it up, was in between 1 million and 1.5 million.
Absolutely. That's where the market continues to stay hot.
That is where the market, and this is where you will do, where was this? Sorry to trip on this. Yeah, 46% were detached, 73% were 905. But 16% of the total sales was in the luxury market over 2 million. And they don't break it down over the 2 million. So what I'll tell you, what I'm seeing is, and this is sad state of affairs in the sense of what luxury means anymore, is that, 10 years ago, $2 million was like you could buy a house in the lower village 20 years ago, right? $2 million right now will not get you a 4-bedroom house in a good school district. It won't. It won't. I sold a house in
like Leslieville, for example, because Leslieville, hotcake, like East End continues to have some of the lowest months of inventory.
So I actually said that in breaking down the areas, that for some reason the East End's EO1, so E is the East End of this, so EO1, Riverdale, it's very hot. EO2, once you get into EO3, it's Crescent Town, you're going a little bit farther east, closer to Scarborough, which is fine. I put clients out there and love it. But in EO1 and EO2, you're still seeing that like 1.5 months of inventory. There's very little.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it's because they still have one of the lowest housing average prices. You can still get a house out there that's a decent price point, but it's not developing, it's developed.
Right.
So in the West End, and you and I know the West End well, there are great pockets in the West End, amazing pockets. Let's even go like New Toronto, like Long. It's still up and coming. If you like, I run, like my running group starts at the flagpole right there by Marine Parade. Okay.
Yeah.
And we go all the way west, all the way to like 4th Street and 3rd Street. Like you can almost, like, we're in Etobicoke. And if you go along there, that is much, much more up and coming than if you go east all the way out to, past the beaches, past like.
Yeah. Yes.
It had more of an anchor, right? Like the beaches in Etobicoke, but the beaches they closed that up more than the West End did.
I think one of the biggest pockets, if you're looking for if you're an investor or you're looking to start your home and have or start a family or what have you, I still believe Mimico, although I sold my property out there, thanks to you, Rachel, for like, I think like a record price on the street. I for what it was. It was incredible what you did.
Oh God, it was crazy. Like you had horseshoes.
Oh yeah. Well, what we did do, it's luck and it's also not luck. I'm gonna like digress.
No, I just listen. I think that the process works. It always does, and we had the right people, and we were. What did we have? Like 120 showings. I remember I had more people in that open house than I knew how to get. It was packed.
It was packed,
and it was packed.
And we did it. We knew a couple of things. Interest rates. So let's talk a little bit about interest rates. We knew that interest rates were about to go up. What does that always do? Every time, without fail, for decades, when interest rates are rumored or likely to go up, all buyers get into the market because what do they want to do? They want to secure a mortgage that is at a lower interest rate. So what does that do? Demand surges through the roof at that time, right? So what ends up happening is sellers who have nowhere to go don't really like to list when this starts to happen. Sorry, do like to list when this starts to happen only if they have somewhere else to go, because they know that if they list, it's difficult to time if interest rates are going to go up. Like if I list now, I won't have the money in hand to buy. And so supply sometimes constrains during those time periods, But that's for a seller, the best time, if you don't have any, if you have somewhere else to live, once you've sold your property for a little bit, it is hot, hot, hot. So we knew that was going to happen. That's why we listed when we did, right? And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And when interest rates did increase, and without fail, market always
And the tenant left. And the tenant left.
left.
If your tenant leaves, that is the best time to
Lucky. And that
the
was
market, put it up.
She wanted to leave. And that was like, oh, wow. And that was actually the defining moment for us. I'm like, we have an empty home. Let's see. And so we knew interest rates were going to go up. And we knew as soon as interest rates go up, buyers get scared, they contract. Headlines say market's crashing, people contract more, and it creates a lot of just concern and discontent in the market. So it's not luck, it's also timing. And in a way, you can quasi time the market in Canada, or when it comes to real estate.
Oh, don't. Oh my God.
No, but you can. For example, interest rates dropped, right? I bet we're going to see a busier June than we anticipated. And I think if rates drop again in July, the summer is going to be busier than we think. Here's why.
It's interesting you said that, because I have had a listing on the market now for 40 days. And we did a price drop, and granted we got, so we a substantial price drop, and we had 4 showings in the first 3 weeks. 4, that was it. And so hence the price drop on week 3. So then we get 4 showings that next week. Great. Okay. And then quiet. And then the interest rate drops, and my phone has not stopped going off.
There you go. That's exactly what I mean.
For this weekend. Yeah.
That's exactly what I mean. Is that
it's so funny to me, because I was like, we talked about this. I'm like, what is 0.25? But that's what it is. It's all psychological.
Of course. And so what ends up happening now is, what I'm concerned about is that we're going to see a lot more activity. Now, activity and showing doesn't mean sold. So let's wait until we see what's selling and if things are selling, because it could be psychological, but the facts are the facts. Like if you can't afford it and the interest rates are still too high for your monthlies, you're done. But point being,
showings are just showings.
Yes. And so I can even hazard a guess here, is that if interest rates do drop in July, possible they will, I'm less certain on that one. I think we're going to see even more, like a busier summer than we had maybe last year even.
Think so?
I think if interest rates drop in July, I think
people will get back in the market, but my feeling is they're going to wait till fall. I just think we're still Canadians, and we have such a short summer. I know that sounds so crazy, but people with kids.
I'm talking about seasonally adjusted. I'm talking about
vacations.
Yeah, sorry. I'm talking about seasonally adjusted though. So like comparable to.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with you. It's not going to be busier than like a spring or a fall market, but I think busier than we anticipate, which makes me concerned, because what does inflation measure? Housing prices. So we might start to see this again.
That's why I think they're not going to raise it in July.
Or cut it.
I mean, unless, and was it you I was talking about was this idea of like PR. So, if there's a scandal, right? So there's a scandal and they want to put out something like a statement about it, but they don't really want it to be noticed, but they want to check a box. They put it out on a Saturday.
Yeah.
No one's going to, I feel like if any, they might do it in July just because that way they get it done, but no one will yes, seasonally, I get that. And I think that, you might have someone who has been looking and now they might take a chance or up their budget or whatever it is. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be an interesting fall, because fall's also listen, even in COVID times, I found summer was quiet. People were still like, I'll be back in the fall.
Right. And again, it's seasonally adjusted is what I'm referring to. So it's not going to blow anything out of the water in comparison to what are traditionally busier months. But if there is a drop, I don't think so, because I think this drop, it may spur enough of concern that they're going to take their foot off the gas. it depends on what employment rates are looking like. So there's a lot of data that they're going to wait for. And I do believe the Bank of Canada is going to really be slow in how they approach things, and cautious, because with elections coming up and the big issue being housing prices, if we start to see another big up, that's just not going to happen. That's not going to work for the government. Right. And so what do you predict June numbers are going to show?
So before yesterday, my prediction was this a lot of the same that we saw in May. I really think that this trend in the 1 million to 1.5 million dollars is a continued trend we're going to see moving forward. There's only so many pockets in the city that are 1 million to 1.5 million. So, do detached numbers in 416 blow out of the water? I just don't think so, because we don't have enough inventory. Excuse me. I think the trend in the 905 to buy out in the suburbs is going to continue.
Okay.
I think the condo market is going to stay really, really soft. It really will. I think but I think that with the buyers coming into this market and first-time buyers dipping their foot back in and wanting to get into the market now that the rates are coming down and it's still soft, I see good inventory selling. Like in the condo, I just think that the buyers are going to have their pick. But again, did I write down the percentage? But yeah, 27% were 66% of all condos were sold in the 416, which is okay, most of them are there, fine. 55% of that volume sold within the $500,000 to $700,000 range.
Yes,
those are first-time buyers.
Yes, if you're looking at activity, like where it falls, it's certainly not in like the 2 million plus. It just makes sense. Like, what can the vast majority of people afford? Right? It's always going to be in like the mid area, specifically first time home buyer or newcomers, right? Which is a very interesting area, because a lot of banks are now looking at the data around newcomers, immigrants, and they're the ones that tend to buy a lot more than those that are generationally Canadian in the same age cohort.
Yeah.
And there could be a whole whack of reasons as to why. I can't speculate. I don't have the reasons as to why. Is it because they're are more motivated, they're willing to make more financial sacrifices, they don't eat the avocado toast? I don't know. However, we know that they're the ones that are more inclined to buy, and they're not buying the $3 million homes, right? They're buying the ones that are cheaper, 700, 500, like that type of area for the most part, right? You certainly have those that are leveraging student visas to get their money out of the particular country, use their kids to buy a home. That's 100% happens. And you and I have seen that in a luxury space.
Oh, excuse me.
You and I have seen that in a luxury space way back in the day. So that does happen. However, again, it's unsurprising to me that it's the lower bracket that's going to be more.
But I also think that there's an immigrant.
Bless you.
Oh my God, excuse me. The sun has come back out and now I'm sneezing. I think that also there's an immigrant contingent that is willing to live in a multi-generational home. And so it becomes more affordable. So I think that's one thing. And I think I sent you a stat the other day. So I listened to this great podcast by Scott Galloway. He's a professor at NYU. I love him. I don't really know otherwise what his reason for fame is, but he's brilliant. I think he's being behind venture capitalists, projects. And I think it's called the Professor G podcast. I highly recommend it to anybody. He's entertaining. And he was doing his predictions for 2024. So I was a little bit slow to the party on that one, but they have their issue in the US, which I think will eventually is coming here. I just think Canadians have a different perspective on things is that the younger generation is giving up on home ownership. They're saying, I don't think that I'm ever going to be able to afford a home. So you know what? I'm going to stop saving my money for this never catch the bus kind of scenario. And I'm going to now spend my money on going on a trip or experiences or whatever. So he quoted that Expedia next to Meta. So Meta was the number one performing stock on the S&P. Expedia was the second. First of all, I would never like I was like, what? And it's such a jury of one because I would never, I have like commitment issues and Expedia, you can't, there's no one to talk to and you can't get a refund. So I'm like, I would never do it. I want to talk to someone. I'm so old. My kids call me, you're such a boomer mom. But I'm like, I want to talk to someone. I want to be able to return it if I'm not happy.
Yeah.
Anyway. And so they're traveling. They're spending their money on this. So, and there was another really interesting stat, which I'll get wrong, but again, something like in the 1970s, the average the average income was $75,000.
Yeah.
And the average home price was $80,000.
Yeah.
Now in the US, your average income is still $75,000, but the average price home is $500,000, right? Again, they have all the states and small cities and whatever.
It's actually worse in Canada. The
Oh,
disparity.
I'm sure, 100%. So now you've got that, and so what? Like, why?
So I've heard this like often quotes or this quote or this not stat but like analysis of what's happening with the younger demographic. It's kind of like it's called lying down. Have you heard the lie down phenomena in China? Same thing's happening. So these younger demographic like Gen Zs are saying, I've watched my parents work their asses off for nothing. I'm not doing that. And so it's called lying down. And it's like an actual movement where they just lie down in their parents' basement, like on a couch. It's called Scott Calloway, I think, might have talked about it. It's called lying down. Like
I'm sure he's
like they're physically reflecting the sentiments of that generation by lying down.
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure that I totally am like, that's great. Like, just not so great. I mean, I think
it's reflective of the attitude, and it's a reflective of what you were saying, which is they're saying, forget it, right? And so
well, I think they also feel the politicians are not with them. Listen, Trudeau just came out and said out loud that housing prices cannot come down because the boomers need it as their retirement. Like that's the reality. And Scott Galloway actually talked about it on his podcast where he said we have now invested in propping up this generation, and we've completely ignored the younger generation. We've left them to figure it out on their own, which like granted, yes, I guess we did also, but we had so much more opportunity. And now there's such a healthcare, like old age homes, all this stuff that the government is like it's almost like a triage system. They're like, we'll get to you guys later because we've got a bigger problem over here, and we've got to keep their housing prices up because there'll be a catastrophe of those housing prices and they don't have the money for it. And we'll worry about you guys younger later because what did he quote? He said something like, again, back in the 1970s, the average age for buying your first house, let's say, was like 28 years old. Buying up was 38. Now it's like 50s.
Also,
like that's your average age.
I want to afford it. Was for paying off your mortgage in the 50s versus in the 1950s, no, say 1960s versus now. I'm so curious about that. Marriage rates, the whole thing, like coupling off.
Marriage rates are at the toilet. That's the other problem.
In fact, in Japan, I forget which city is now developing their own dating app to encourage people to start marrying each other because of the population issue, which is reflected in the fact they also don't buy real estate. Now, I know we're short on time and I want to say some important things. So we see, so what you were saying about—
What did you predict, Natalka?
No. So this is something that I'm seeing in our data on Houseful, or maybe it's anecdotally, and I'm like, So we're talking about Gen Z not being able to afford in the current model. True. What we're seeing is an influx of people looking at on our site co-ownership, timeshares, co-ops, rent to own. And I think, do you remember like back in the day, rent to own was like dirty word, like you don't do that.
By the way, what are all these people doing? You rent to own with your bank. That's what a mortgage is. Like the reality is
down payment because it overcomes a down
you know
payment.
what I mean? I'm just saying, like, of course it's not the same thing, but the reality is it's the same thing. And I think that's what it is. People are not paying their mortgage off anymore. They're not. How are these kids going to pay their mortgage off?
So the rent, but what we're seeing is that rent to own, home equity sharing models, right? Like Arbro, et cetera, they're popping up and they're starting to become part of the mind share of the younger consumer as to how they can get into co-ownership. Buying with friends, not your husband, not your wife, not your partner, buying with your friends,
Yeah.
buying with family. And so what I think we're going to see, not in the June data, but over the time horizon,
Yeah.
is we're going to start seeing those models, rent to own, equity sharing models, co-ownership, those type of things, buying with several people. That is going to be, I believe, the new norm for those who don't have family to cut them a check to buy a piece of real estate.
Yeah, I
That's
agree. I agree because they're the ones that are the hardest hit.
Yes. So if you're an entrepreneur in this space, your time will be coming in which those models are going to work. I won't go into the economics of it because I looked at these type of models in the past. It only works, of course, if you have a low borrowing cost. I'm not talking for the end consumer. I'm talking for the person that's providing those models.
Yeah.
But neither here nor there. So that's what I'm thinking is the future, and we're seeing more people search for that on our website. Stuff that like no one would touch.
No, I know co-ops, but now I'm like, oh my God, I would tell my kids to buy a co-op.
Yeah. Oh
They're
yeah.
gonna, I really believe, here's a prediction for you. Because I predicted the laneway
Yes. Yes.
and I'm not at my 5-year mark. I said 5 years from now, they will own the keys to the kingdom and we're getting there. Okay. So the people who own on major streets might also be like inching up there, but we can do a podcast on that. But I think that, oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. What was I going to predict? It was really good.
About
Oh,
not
co-ops.
co-ops.
I think that co-ops are going to start seeing a rise in the increase in value. So there's two issues, and then we'll have to shut this down because we could do a whole thing on it. And actually, we should do a
Next one.
That'll be our next one. Is the challenge with them is, first of all, you have to have a larger down payment. So you can't just do 5%, you can't do 10%, you have 20%, sorry, you have to have sometimes up to 40%. Okay, so that really hinders a lot of it. The second is that from an investment standpoint, they've never accrued value in the same way. I predict that will change. I predict that they won't skyrocket because then, it changes.
Demand is not there because
But I will tell you, some of the best co-ops, most of them actually in the city of Toronto, are all in high-end areas.
I know.
Are all in Rosedale. They're all in Rosedale. They're all in Summerhill. And like I have a listing coming up at 21 Dale. It is on the most palatial property, gorgeous, gorgeous. They actually have a history to it. If you look up, I'll put it in the show notes it's the history of this building is gorgeous. They have an old talk about like regal New York concierge at the front. Their gardens could win awards and you can get like a 1,600 square foot. I looked for pool, by the way, 1,600 square foot condo in that building for less than 1,000 square feet, cost. And you are steps from multi-million-dollar homes. You can walk to the subway, you can walk to Rosedale, you can get on the 401. Like and you look at the ones at Forest Hill, on Eglinton by the LRT, in the Village right at Spadina and St. Clair, like there are many in great locations. I just don't think from an affordability standpoint, these are going to stay at half the price that they are now.
Right. I'm looking at it right now. Does it have its own library?
Yes.
Look at the right one.
Oh my God, it's gorgeous. Look it up, 21 Dale. Telling you, if you ever if I ever wanted, like from a retirement standpoint, where you're like, you know what, I just want a place to live and it's good, whatever. I would live there in a heartbeat.
Oh my God, you should be their salesperson. You will
I
be.
should be.
You
I
will
should
be.
be. Anyway, we covered way more than the data. That was awesome. I feel like we could, wouldn't that be great? We could have Scott Galloway on to talk about the Toronto real estate market. He wouldn't return my call if I sold my soul, but I love to see your face. And I'm now going to go pour myself a drink because I've had a week.
Oh, I know. And I can't wait. I'm predicting you're gonna have a very interesting summer. So I think so.
Is it
There's,
interesting at my cottage? Because I really need my cottage. But yes, I think that there will be, and I have a young agent on my team who has had a tough go of it in the last year just because a lot of her contacts are younger, trying to get on the market, couldn't touch it. And I said to her, I think you're going to get a lot of calls in the next 6 months.
oh, I can't wait. Let's pick it up.
You,
Let's
yeah,
pick it up on that.
co-ownership and co-op for the next one. I think that's going to be a really in the consensus of affordability in the city of Toronto.
Absolutely. And then
And on that,
and your young
what?
agent, tap on your young agent's shoulder and let me know what she's saying too. I'm so curious.
I will.